Greetings, everyone, and welcome to TRG 30. TRG 30, where every other week now we're talking about the bold change required for the resilience of the arts and cultural sector. And speaking of bold change, our U.S. friends and colleagues, we know many of you are planning on trying to submit applications to the Shuttered Venues Operators Grant to support your reopening. We know that this has been a tough time and we'd like to help. Right now, Stephen is dropping information about services we've designed specifically with the SVOG in mind. Visit this link. We will help you take advantage of this welcome, bold change for our sector's resilience. And today, on TRG 30, we are diving into the topic of inventory management. Inventory management, sexy stuff, right? I hope by the end of our time together, you'll share my opinion, at least about its importance. So inventory, what am I talking about? I'm talking about your seats, your available admissions, access to special events. These are among the most valuable assets your organization manages, and increasingly in the next 12 to 18 months may be scarce. You know this, but are you thinking about the different ways you may need to manage this inventory in this specific cycle, this specific year? What do you need to do to ensure that your inventory, your real estate is how I really think about it, works for your organization? For example, to honor your longtime patron relationships, make space for new ones, maximize income, create affordable entry points, and always reflect your values. Now, all of you in this room, you all have different business models, budget sizes, staff limits, resources. Today, we're going to be talking about concepts and frameworks for action. But later, I'll share with you how we're going to provide an opportunity for you to dig in deeper into the tactics. As always, I want to cue you up to listen for some things. Change. Does your current plan, as you've been thinking about it, require a shift perhaps as a result of our conversation today? Let's think both about the short and the long term. How will the choices you're making this year impact next year and beyond? We have to think with the destination, with the end in mind. And action this year, we need to build flexibility in and ensure that we are aligned. Ensure that we are aligned. Last time we were together, we talked about values and posture. Our communications, our plans, our actions must reflect our institutional values, and our posture has to reinforce it. The same is true when we talk inventory use, and the true north, the focal points for our roadmaps must be these two things: relationships and revenues. Relationships and revenues. Let's start with relationships. Critical during a crisis, as we learned last year when I read for the first time Strauss and Howe's book, The Fourth Turning. It was published in the late 90s and tracked back to the Reformation about how we as a species of humans navigate crisis. Relationships are key to thriving through crises, and it's critical to our navigation now. We also ask this question: with whom will you gather? When you return to live events, we're asking this again today because we're on the precipice of this, and we challenged you collaboratively to identify and prioritize the segments that you currently serve, those you wish to serve, and to plan for how you'll show up for them when your doors reopen. Today, know that this is where we are going to start when we think about inventory management plans. But we can't think about that and those relationships in isolation. You also, I know, I hear it. You have very real revenue targets and likely reduced resources with which to achieve them. So you're going to need to, in the short term, marry your relationship priorities with your revenue targets. We began talking about this prioritization last November. If you need a refresher or you weren't able to join us, you can find episode 35 on our website. As we said, let's start with relationships. Your list of relationship priorities in your organizations may include the things that you see here: donors, current subscribers, lapsed members, patrons who've donated back tickets or left money on account, past bookers. But as you think to the next 12 to 18 months, what does your strategic plan, your organizational plan say about how your organization is going to seek to serve different kinds of people in your community? Students, new neighbors, perhaps government funders have become a new kind of relationship that you actually seek to serve. Online and digital newbies. Maybe your group of prioritized patron segments looks something like this. Regardless, all of this requires alignment. And now we're going to need to get serious and practical about it. If you haven't sat down with your leadership to reconcile these priorities, you must now. At TRG, we're recommending an alignment session specifically on this that ensures you're all A-OK with the relationships you're prioritizing this year and why. And then we need to talk revenues. And there are lots of variables in this conversation about revenues. And we need to start with this: an invitation and a value proposition that makes the math work. What do I mean by value proposition? We're going to dive in here and unpack that. But in short, it's a combination of the variables in the invitation. It's the timing, the time you're asking me to be somewhere, price point, the benefits maybe that you're aligning with that price point, the product. And it all has to result in helping your organization achieve your revenue targets at a time when you have limits. You may have socially distanced limits now. You may have them in the future. They may be removed in the future. You have different limits than you've had before. And you also have limits here on your staff teams, their capacities, and what they're able to accomplish on behalf of the next 12 to 18 months. That may grow too. We'll need the flexibility in the systems as I'm going to describe it so that we can deal with these changing limits. But to start, I want to talk about seats. I've got this airplane model here. I seriously miss traveling and seeing you all in person. But as we talk about seats and admissions and access, we have to think about what you've promised. We were talking to people a lot over this past pandemic year, inviting them to stick with us, promising that when we got back together, we'd honor them. And now the question is, which of these promises can you fulfill? Socially distanced performances, shorter runs, new venues, staff capacity make it more difficult? Is it possible to deliver on these promises this year? So collectively, you and your colleagues are going to need to prioritize who gets access to the seats or events or timing they love the best and allocate that inventory accordingly. With whom will we gather? Now is the time to match the relationship plan and priorities to your inventory plan and realities. Do you have enough inventory to honor those relationships? I'm going to try to make this as practical as I can and look at an example. This is a hypothetical organization. We'll see how they are taking steps to prioritize, and you might put to everyone in chat now the kinds of prioritized relationships that you in your organization are having to grapple with and consider and plan for, so that you can see between your colleagues what you're collectively confronting. In this organization, the first priority are members and donors. As it says, without them, this organization would have been sunk. So much of the income that they experienced that enabled them to maintain the staff complement that they had was provided by members and donors who just didn't go away. So how many of them are there? Question mark. What proportion of them do you anticipate wanting to come back in the next 6 months, in the next 12 months? Matching that against available inventory, step 1. For this organization, ticket bookers who donated or left money on account, they're already in the family. We need to make sure that they feel like it. So how many of them are there? How many events do we anticipate that they're going to participate in? It is a projection. It is a right now plan without a lot of data, but you've got to create it. What is your projection for these bookers whom you know are going to want to come back at some level? Then we've got people who bought joyously, like we celebrate. We have pandemic buyers. They purchased online. They participated in our digital events. We want them to feel like family. We've got to ensure we've got inventory for them. Have to do the math. I'll describe that here in a minute. And then finally, this organization is working in very purposeful ways in EDIA and wants to and is asking now, okay, we've got these 3. We must carve out some of our available inventory for our new neighbors, for our community. And they're grappling with that right now. What's most critical is that you're aligning your assets and your resources accordingly, and that you together are defining success. Inventory. We've got to map it. Then we need to be looking at something called the value proposition or the part of the value proposition called pricing. And really this is about, excuse me, carving up your scale of hall plan, your hall, or your availability for your exhibits. Some number of years ago, I discovered an author and a consultant named Rafi Muhammad, whom after a conversation with him and reading his book, The 1% Windfall, I discovered he thinks very much like we do at TRG Arts. Muhammad talks regularly about the benefits of offering multiple price points. And for those of you who've worked with us to scale your house before, you know that we recommend multiple price points. Here's why. Offering good, better, and best pricing options gives your patrons choice about how they value your product or the seat, the access, the other benefits you might offer and tie in. It allows for affordable access points for those who might be more price sensitive and opportunities for those who are ready to spend, to invest more in their experience with your organization. So an important rule, offering multiple price points. Stephen is going to drop into chat a link of an interview with Harvard Business Review and Rafi that speaks to his point about, or his thoughts about pricing during the pandemic. It's 20 minutes, but a really super interesting interview. I highly recommend you take a look at it. In addition, there are other things we'd suggest you think about related to pricing beyond multiple price points. For many of you, the way you start this season may look very different from last season, and potentially even by the end of the season, it will be different again. Here are some thoughts that you may want to consider and tweaks you could make related to your scale of house, your pricing structure, your admission structure. So first, the number of price points. If you only had 1 before, now is the time to expand. If you had 6 or more and you're operating under reduced capacity, now's the time to contract. On the high end, if your experience and product is consistent with what you were doing before the pandemic, you can very well keep your high level where it was. If you have high demand plus new value that you're wrapping into a price point or an experience, you can consider and should an increase. On the low end though, let's ensure that your lowest price really is accessible. And it may need to be temporarily lower this year, but put context around that. Limited time, reopening pricing. and many of you are probably wondering about this year, we would say don't shy away from it. In fact, it may be more important than ever. Pricing is a tool and a moment in time. As things shift in your communities, your prices may need to as well. At this point, we only have speculation. We don't have a lot of data about how and when and if audiences are going to return. Remember, though, that dynamic pricing is about the increment. You're not doubling prices and revenues this way. Your inventory management plan, how many seats you have at which price points, are going to deliver the bulk of your revenues this year. Okay, so let's exhale for just a minute. If you've been tuning in regularly, you know that we've been pushing for change and adaptation in the way that we work and the way that we engage audiences nearly every time we've spoken. And I believe we have to evolve our practices to become more relevant, financially stable, and the breathtakingly awesome sector that our communities need. But let's think carefully about the variables that inform your value proposition. Pricing is not the time to introduce change that adds more turvy to our topsy-turvy worlds. This isn't the time for wild price hikes, nor is it the time for panicked discounting. Maintain your strategy tied to your value proposition and your values. Remember, we want to be the trusted friend as we come back to live together. Okay, the math. Each of you are going to have different realities, but all of you need to be prepared to do this math. So first, you need to identify your priority segments. We've described that, and create the right offer, value proposition, price. Evaluate what your expected participation is. Do you have enough inventory? And will all of that and all of the segments that you've decided to prioritize reasonably get you to or close to your revenue goal? If not, then you've got some decisions to make. You may need to adjust inventory. You may need to reprioritize the segments, as you see here. You may need to tweak your pricing or benefits, or reset your revenue targets and goals for the year. This is where the rubber hits the road, for sure. And yet, we don't have crystal balls. The story isn't written yet. We need flexibility in our approaches and our processes. Things like capacity flexibility. Might you have to snap back into new action, either contracting or expanding? And how will you prioritize those seat changes? This plan, built in iterative timestamps, can help you plan for just that. Information and data is key. At least twice a week, be looking at that, if not more often than it. We don't have historical data. We need real-time data that helps us understand how patrons in our communities are reacting to the inventory, pricing, and value proposition we've put in front of them. And man, oh man, calling all copywriters, communications are more important now than ever. So find them in your organization. They may be in unexpected places, but you need someone who knows how to write quickly, easily, and in ways that reflect your values. And at the risk of sounding like a broken record, it's sort of with this in mind that I advance our conversation about posture. Let's communicate, as we talked about the last time we were together, with transparency and generosity in mind. And that might show up and look like this: getting rid of complicated and unnecessary return or exchange policies. And if you follow me on LinkedIn, you see no jargon. It reflects actually something not good about us and our organizations if we sloppy our way into jargon or use it as a shield. No jargon. Simplify. Let's also consider benefits as you consider good, better, best. Benefits that might help your patrons in the return in your spaces, whatever that might mean. Speak clearly about your priorities, why someone is a priority and why, internally, so your team knows it, and to your patrons in your communication. And remember, you are in this together in your communities. We're coming back to life together. So if we bring this all together now, let's start here, relationships. Remember to ensure that you have alignment around who you can and must serve this year. Remember that you have limits. Plan for what and when you can expand and infuse this work, tie it in with your organizational values and priorities. Related to revenues, use all the tools you have at your disposal to work toward your financial targets. You're going to create a value proposition that's leveraged by access and benefits. You want consistency. This is not the time for more turvy in our topsy-turvy. And dynamic pricing is a tool that can help you reflect the change in your inventory as you go. And finally, we need to build flexibility into our thinking and our action. Now, I feel how much framework is here and how much is here. And I know how it might leave you hungering for more. And so it's with that in mind, in fact. Stephen is going to put a link in chat now. We are hosting a deeper dive webinar because we've heard you. You have different budgets. You have different staff capacities and different business models. And sometimes a 30-minute conversation with me doesn't enable you to go deeply enough. April 27th, Stephen and our colleague Lindsay Anderson are going to host this hour-long deeper dive, and you there can join them for additional insights and live Q&A to support your specific inventory management plan. And always, we are here with services that can help customize your plans. If you need to go deeper, please visit our website. We want to be your partners in resiliency and your own relevance. Stephen, as we near the bottom of the hour, I wonder what questions we might have that we can respond to in this moment.
Of course, just to clarify, the webinar is April 22nd. April 22nd, and wherever you are, we've tried to make that time the right time for your time zone. So Lindsay and I look forward to seeing you there and taking your questions. We have got time for a couple now. Any that you submit now that we're not able to answer, Lindsay and I will take forward into the webinar next week. So we'll look forward to taking your questions there too. Jill, thank you for stepping us through that. You're right, there's a lot to think about. And so some tactical questions that have come in. One from Chad, who asks around how can we talk about needed price increases to patrons who have money on account? Because what $1 got them last year will now cost them $1.20. Is there a varied approach we might want to consider if there are price increases, Jill?
Well, I'd love to talk with you about this, Stephen, because you too have consulting experience we can draw on. But my first thought is for those people who have money on account, must we increase their price? And if we must, then might we give them an opportunity to redeem their credit before that price increase, to frame their priority within our family, to frame our desire to bring them back, but also say, listen, after this particular deadline, we are going to have this kind of small increase to help us whatever the right, I'm loath to put language in here too much, but I wonder what you think about that, Stephen.
No, I think it's a perfect opportunity to solidify the relationship that we have with those folks and the journey that they've been on through this time. So to your point, to utilize that to acknowledge and affirm the relationship, but also use that as some form of incentive to encourage folks to take some action. To your point, we're not quite sure how people will behave. There's certainly interesting sentiment that's coming out of various surveys that makes some suggestions, but we're going to see how that plays out. So absolutely use it to solidify the relationship. And if you must increase, then put some sort of time limitation onto it. Courtney asks, what do we do if donors and subscribers fill our house and we have no inventory left for single ticket buyers? Do you
Right.
suggest holding some for single ticket buyers and perhaps needing to block out donors and subs?
It's really, really, really wonderful question. And this is where the math has to play out, Courtney.
Yeah.
So I would be looking at the volume of subscribers and donors and matching that against my inventory as you've just done, but not all of them, question mark, will all of them come back for your first performance? You've got to model out some scenarios and then make a decision. If you anticipate having limited capacity for 6 full months, then my instinct is, right, you're going to need to have some capacity for the single ticket buying audience. But based on what I'm seeing, Stephen, now this will of course vary by region, but there's so much that's dynamic right now because of vaccines.
Mm.
And so the static, this isn't going to be static. So if I were planning, I might plan in monthly or 3-month increments with some just don't make it overly complicated, but just some assumptions about what you might face, and then do the invitation and see if the response is meeting what your expectation is or isn't, and go from there.
Let's quick fire these last couple, Jill, so we can get
Yeah.
to a question. In fact, this is a theme in conversations I've had around marketplace and competitors, what they're doing. How do we react to that? What do we do? So this question from Lee is, in a smaller market with other presenters, as a university presenter that has money, we don't. How much do we consider what competitors are doing to reopen?
Well, I think this is everyone's dealing with this, and my own instinct is that this is the time to be solidifying your relationship with your patrons. And if you haven't been doing that, it's possible for you to do that now. I think TRG's long-standing point of view about managing relationships and loyalty is one that just really would suggest getting in front of the people who've been to your institution and making sure that they're aware of what your plans are, even if you're not launching them yet. So just making sure that that connection is there so that they know that you're coming back and they know that you're going to be keeping them posted.
Mm-hmm. I know that Lindsay will want to dig on this question further from Jim, where he says, I like being reminded that pricing is a tool. If we offer a super low price point, do you suggest offering it in advance or use it as a day of or walk up way to offer that lower price?
Yeah, we like strategic discounting, Jim. And so last minute discounting creates behaviors that can be counter to the kind of long-term destination, long-term goals that we've got. So advanced discounting that's targeted based on where you think you're going to have needs or open inventory is what I suspect Lindsay would start with. It won't be where she ends or where you end. So I hope that you will be able to join, and all of you will be able to join this webinar on the 22nd. And in various time zones. Of course, we've got it seated so that we hope all of you can join and dig into these tactics that do matter, the details that I know you're grappling with in this important work.
Yeah, and before we sign off, Sebastian has made a good point around lapsed members, right, and donors that have not been able to utilize their benefits in the way this season. Those are the types of relationships that Lindsay and I are going to want to talk about a little bit further next week. So we look forward to seeing you there. Jill will miss you there, but you'll be back in 2 weeks, right?
I will be, and everyone is in the best possible hands.
Well, take care, everyone. Thanks for being with us. Thanks for submitting your questions, and we'll look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.